We have no evidence at this time that the reported drone sightings pose a national security or a public safety threat or have a foreign nexus. John Kirby, Pentagon spokesman. It is strange, of course, to learn of drones the size of SUVs trolling our skies. And yes, the drone hysteria of 2024 is here. But we need to ask the right questions to understand this situation. For example, are all the sighted objects drones? Perhaps a subset of more mysterious objects is being pursued by government drones. And then, perhaps, the government cannot admit to investigating something they do not fully understand. For, in that event, they would have to admit that our airspace has been penetrated. They would have to admit to incapacity. On Wednesday, the Pentagon confirmed that the drones are not theirs. Of course, there are over 1 million registered drones in the United States, and there is no way for the military to easily sort them out. Foreign spies, using drones, could be mapping our military bases. But then, our enemies have known where these bases are for many years. Why bring attention to themselves by sending so many drones at once into U.S. bases? Congressman Michael McCaul, chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, told C-SPAN that we need to know who is behind the drones. McCaul thinks the drones are under Chinese control, that they are spying on our military bases. And he might be correct. The current run of drone sightings began in November, with over 5,000 reports from citizens to the FBI. According to Newsweek magazine of December 18th, a Chinese national was arrested on December 11th for allegedly flying a drone over and taking photographs of Vandenberg Space Force Base in Santa Barbara County, California. Does this incident account for all the drone activity? It may indeed account for some of it. Members of Congress are alarmed and unhappy with the military's amateur hour briefing on the drone question, as one congressman characterized it. Of course, those interested in UFOs have another perspective that should be taken into account. Ross Coulthart interviewed UFO expert Lou Elizondo on News Nation Wednesday regarding the New Jersey drone mystery. According to Elizondo, many reports reflect the 5 observables that make this more than a question of drones. Those 5 are 1. Anti-gravity, 2. Instant acceleration, 3. Hypersonic speed without signatures, 4. Erratic movement, and 5. Transmedium travel, i.e., with objects coming out of the water into the air. Elizondo cited a case where a civilian attempted to chase a mystery drone with his own personal drone, but his drone was instantly drained of power and fell to the ground. Is this hysteria? Possibly. Ross Coulthart reminded his audience that Lou Elizondo and David Grush, both former military intelligence officials, have alleged that the United States government has a UFO crash retrieval program that has recovered non-human technology. Coulthart asked Elizondo what he thinks of the drone hysteria. Elizondo replied, "It's quite possible. I see 2 scenarios. Either A, these are all US-made drones, sniffing for nukes, or B, we are dealing with 2 things simultaneously. UAP sightings in which government quadcopters, i.e., drones, are going out to try to find these things, UFOs/UAPs. Both Coulthart and Elizondo, who have considerable knowledge of the NEST teams of the Department of Energy, engaged in a fascinating discussion wherein they both effectively debunk the idea that this drone activity is part of a nuclear weapon sniffing operation. The NEST teams, they both agreed, are very effective when it comes to looking for nuclear weapons that have been smuggled into the United States. But these teams do not fly around using colored lights with their transponders turned off." Elizondo asked, if they are NEST teams, why are they breaking protocol by operating only at night? And why are they breaking protocol by not coordinating with state and local and tribal authorities as they should be? Why are they not listed on flight awareness apps? Why aren't they listing their flight paths with the FAA? Here we must return to the fact, noted above, that a Chinese national was caught operating a drone over Vandenberg. And yet, the U.S. government insists that the mass drone sightings along the eastern seaboard are not under foreign control. On all points, this kind of statement is puzzling. Either the Pentagon is lying to us, or they are incompetent, or they are hiding something that embarrasses or compromises them. This latter possibility, which is the most frightening of all, leads us to questions touching on the so-called deep state. Some of the reported drones are said to be as big as an SUV. How could China operate something that significant without being caught? Would they dare? What if such an object crashed? And yet, The Pentagon says these are not U.S. military drones. As Elizondo and Coulthart maintain, these are not Department of Energy drones. So what are they? In trying to answer this question, Coulthart said, "I bled my sources dry. The FBI says the drones are not theirs. Homeland Security says the drones are not theirs. And more importantly, the Department of Energy says these things are not theirs. We are running out of available agencies." Are we? Coulthart then asked a more troubling question. Could these things be from a rogue element within the state? What rogue element could these be? On what kind of mission? Are they a patriotic rogue element or a faction in league with the nation's enemies? If our answer lies in this direction, we must determine which kind of rogue element it is. Neither Coulthart or Elizondo acknowledged the story about the Chinese national caught flying a drone and taking pictures over Vandenberg. Neither acknowledged the extent of Chinese infiltration. The Chinese own a lot of property in the United States. They have large companies with big warehouses and other buildings. Hundreds of thousands of Chinese nationals are here, on U.S. soil. Does anyone really think the Chinese are incapable of operating large drones out of these facilities? Months ago, this website interviewed Mr. Wang of Lude Media, who said China was planning on smuggling large numbers of drones into the United States for future operations. I do not think we can rule out China as the culprit. In concluding this subject, President-elect Trump made a curious statement about the drone sightings. He said, "The government knows what is happening. Our military knows where they took off from. They know where it came from and where it went. And for some reason, they don't want to comment. And I think they'd be better off saying what it is. Our military knows and our president knows. And for some reason, they want to keep the people in suspense." With this statement, the mystery deepens. In this and related matters, the wilderness of mirrors blinds us. We have not established, in all these mysteries, a proper methodology for understanding the modern state and what it has become. The issue of secrecy and the practice of self-aggrandizing fraud is linked to the fact that corruption is endemic throughout our system. But this corruption is not random. It is highly organized. In fact, it is organized because of the initiatives of guilty politicians, bureaucrats, and the police, the middle managers of corruption and crime. In the USSR, the Soviet Special Services recognized this in the 1950s, in the wake of Stalin's death and the death of the USSR's chief organizer of crime, Lavrentiy Beria, who was murdered by Khrushchev, Timoshenko, and Zhukov. The 1953 to 1956 reorganization of the Soviet Secret Police and Interior Ministry under Ivan Sarev became, as well, a reorganization of the crime syndicates that ran the Soviet economy. An honest assessment of the Soviet system, then undertaken under Khrushchev's initiative, contemplated reforms. But there could be no cure as long as the system remained committed to socialism. As Ludwig von Mises once explained, there is no such thing as a socialist economy. Consequently, the criminalization of economic activity merely guarantees a criminal system. Political economy is not a crackpot science. Its sociological aspect is clear. Whenever government attempts to ban or regulate a commodity, illicit wealth is created. The state's enforcers and politicians use their monopoly of violence to enrich themselves from this illicit wealth. One may cite, in this context, the groundbreaking work of the Soviet journalist Arkady Vaxberg, who narrowly escaped assassination when he unlocked the dirty secret of how the Soviet economy actually functioned, as opposed to the ideological illusion of the command economy. The Soviet system was always a patchwork of bureaucratic fiefdoms, which work in a semi-feudal way. The same is true today. The regional links to the center were not as solid as they were supposed to be when the false liberation reached critical mass in 1991. Some oligarchs began to do their own thing. Some regions began to do their own thing. The power vertical began to break down. They probably did not realize the extent of the damage until 1998. Putin was brought into the system in 1999, in the nick of time, to instill discipline, to repair the power vertical and the fragmenting of horizontal structures. A strengthening of the center over the regions was the plan. Putin was, in essence, a KGB man sent to put some stick about. In other words, he was a policeman. He was a police organizer. The secret to understanding Putin's career as president of Russia is to understand that organized crime is always something imposed by the police. In an absolute state, the criminals do not have enough guns to defeat the regime. The regime therefore decides on the proper functioning of the crime syndicates, that is, in accordance with state purposes. Here we see the real meaning of the term deep state. During Prohibition in America, during the 1920s and 30s, the mayor of Chicago got the best bottle of whiskey smuggled in through the Great Lakes from Canada. The Chicago police stood on the beaches guarding the alcohol shipments of the mafia. The police, of course, got a chunk of the take. Jewish and Irish mobsters organized the shipments from abroad. But at the top of the feeding chain stood the bureaucrats, politicians, and police. The state holds the ultimate monopoly on violence. Thus, any government control of the economy immediately criminalizes the police and political structures. The more state exercises control over commodities, the deeper the corruption and criminalization of the state. Here is an important aspect of our strategic problem. For the Soviet hierarchy became self-aware, and they looked toward America and realized that America also had a corruption problem. Thus, the possibility arose of merging the two criminal systems. Of course, this would not be an easy task. Leverage from other dimensions of conflict are needed to break through. Why do I make such a long note attached to this article? Because part of the UFO mystery may be connected to a larger system of corruption, especially having to do with the flow of money within the research and development system of the Pentagon and the so-called black budget. The congressional testimony we have heard on UFOs indicates corruption in terms of the allocation of defense funds, black projects, etc. Murder has even been alleged in terms of covering up this activity. This might be strategically significant, for the diversion of precious defense funds into some kind of UFO reverse engineering scam must inevitably damage our strategic position.